Throughout this month, we take the time to celebrate the achievements of Black Americans and recognize their immeasurable role in our nation's history. For many years and still today, Black Americans have courageously stood up against inequality, challenging systemic racism and discrimination in society to push our country towards our founding values of equality and justice and opportunity for all. We have witnessed this in the work of great Americans like civil rights activist, author, and poet Maya Angelou. Through her writings and her art, Maya Angelou opens our eyes to the continued inequalities that Black Americans, and specifically Black women, face. She brought voice to the struggle, but more importantly, she showed us the beauty of resilience. She inspired and uplifted and encouraged so many people through her literary works, and her impact is still felt throughout our country today. In fact, this past month, Maya Angelou became the first Black woman to be featured on the U.S. Quarter, recognizing her significant achievements and contributions to the American story. As Congress continues to become more representative of our country and we continue to be more diverse and more inclusive, I'd like to also recognize some of my colleagues and the other Black women who have served in this institution and have paved the way for progress. When I was an intern in Congress, someone who defined the word trailblazer and who personally inspired me was Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. Congresswoman Chisholm became the first African-American woman in Congress in 1968, only 4 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. In 1972, she made history again by becoming the first Black woman of a major party to run for a presidential nomination. In the same decade, we witnessed the March on Washington, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. famously declared, "I have a dream." The Freedom Riders were braving the South in protest of segregation in buses, and four courageous college students refused to leave Woolworth's lunch counter without being served. In the midst of these calls for justice, Congresswoman Chisholm had a prominent role in American politics, and she served for 7 terms in the United States House of Representatives. Congresswoman Barbara Jordan was the first African-American woman to be elected to the House from the Deep South. She represented Texas from 1972 to 1978, and in 1976, she became the first African-American woman to deliver a keynote address at the Democratic National Convention. Carol Moseley Braun was the first African-American woman to be elected to the United States Senate in 1992, a seat she held until 1998. Today, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee remains the longest serving African-American woman in Congress. She has represented her congressional district since 1995. I was so proud to serve with her in addition to the 50 Black women who are working for the people in Congress. I would be remiss not to mention my friend and California's own Vice President Kamala Harris, who broke barriers when she became California's first Black American and Asian American senator. Then in January 2021, she was sworn in as the first female vice president, the first Black American, and the first Asian American vice president of this country. These phenomenal women are but a few examples of the Black Americans who have shaped the character and identity of our nation. Today and every day, let us celebrate Black history and remember that Black history is American history.